So in part one of my World Cup stories, I talked about Canada's road to the 2022 World Cup, which was impressive enough that Canada had to qualify through pool play because they weren't that well received in CONCACAF with their rankings. They moved all the way up. They beat Haiti to get to the Octagon, which was the final tournament for CONCACAF North American nations to get into the 2022 World Cup. And Canada not only made it to the World Cup, being one of the three automatic spots, they won the group technically. But still, Canada got a crappy draw with Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco because, their FIFA World Cup ranking, the world ranking. However, this is not the first time Canada will be at the World Cup. And I know that people say, wait a minute, Canada gets to host or co-host the World Cup as it is in 2026. So they were in anyway. Yeah, their second appearance could have been 2026, 40 years after the first one, but it's going to be the third appearance. So Canada is ready to rumble at the 2022 World Cup. But imagine yourself thinking, how did Canada do in 1986 at the World Cup? Well, I'll tell you all about the 1986 World Cup and give you more historical significance because the 86 World Cup was very big. This is Canada at the 1986 World Cup. Imagine a world where in the 1980s, prosperity, Ronald Reagan, and world conflicts came in with the Cold War. Imagine 1986, if you will. Canada was set to host the World Expo 86 in Vancouver, which was the second time Canada ever did it before 1967 at Montreal. And imagine Wayne Gretzky dominating the NHL very heavily. I know you would, and so would I. But also imagine Canada, of all countries, getting to the 1986 World Cup in a world that the Americans were not really that great at soccer and didn't have good a national team and wouldn't qualify for a World Cup for 4 years. And imagine that CONCACAF only got 2 spots in the tournament because, well, Mexico is the host and then there's only one CONCACAF spot. But remember, this is a 24-team tournament, whereas now it's a 32-team tournament and will go up to 48 by 2026. And also imagine a world where a young 14-month-old named Jeffrey William Henry Diamond was trying to learn to walk and talk, but was delayed because of my autism. And imagine, the Diamond family, as they had lost, well, the patriarch lost the dad. Like, my paternal grandfather passed away in December 1985. I don't know how they would have reacted to what they talk about in 1986, where they all were. Like, there were a lot of cousins of mine who were very small babies and all that, or toddlers and all that. And imagine, the press coverage and how Canada was perceived to be in the World Cup and how good Canada probably was going to do or not do. All that time for context. So it's time to review the 1986 World Cup. But we have to give context. So for Canada's sake. So Canada was told they would have to qualify to face Jamaica. So in the first round in 1984, CONCACAF decided to have 16 teams in CONCACAF pair up for 8 home and away draws for knockout stages to qualify alongside Guatemala to get into the next round. El Salvador crushed Puerto Rico. Canada would have faced Jamaica, but they withdrew, so Canada qualified automatically. The U.S. had to face the Netherlands Antilles, which kind of like carousel. Barbados withdrew, so Costa Rica made it through. Honduras crushed Panama 4-0. This is not the same Panama as 2022. Grenada withdrew, so Trinidad qualified. Haiti beat Antigua 5-2. And Suriname beat Guyana. So that got them to the 85 CONCACAF Championship, which was basically the qualification for the 86 World Cup. So 18 teams entered, and it was down to 9. The problem was that CONCACAF was only given 2 spots out of 24 in the final tournament for Mexico 86. Well, Mexico got in because of the host. So 1 spot, 9 teams. It was huge. In Group 1 of qualification, Honduras took on El Salvador and Suriname. Honduras and El Salvador always having big fights with each other because, the soccer war of 1970. In the end, Honduras, with 2 wins and 2 ties, took down El Salvador and Suriname to qualify for the final 3. Canada would be in a group with Guatemala and Haiti. Canada hosted in Victoria against Haiti and won 2-0 on goals by Igor Fabric and Michael Sweeney. Canada would then play Guatemala in Victoria and win 2-1 on pair goals by Dale Mitchell. Canada would travel to Guatemala, tie Guatemala 1-1 as Mitchell scored his 3rd goal of the competition. And then Canada went to Port-au-Prince, Haiti to win 2-0 as Mitchell and Vrelevic scored. Canada knew they were in. With 3 wins and a tie against Guatemala and Haiti, they were in the final 3. The Americans were strong, but Costa Rica was stronger. The Americans did beat Trinidad 2-1. And then beat Trinidad 1-0. So they were 2-0 against them. Unfortunately for the Americans, they had to go to Costa Rica. They had a tie, but then they lost on home turf in Torrance, California, losing 1-0 to Costa Rica on a goal by Coronado. So the Americans were not in. So it was down to Canada, Honduras, Costa Rica for that one CONCACAF spot. Costa Rica and Honduras battled each other to a 2-2 tie. Then Canada, Varsity Stadium in Toronto, which has hosted a lot of great cups before they moved to the Exhibition Stadium in 1959. Tied Costa Rica 1-1. Canada was down 1-0, but a goal by Paul James did the hero. Here's the hero, 1-1. Then Canada went to Honduras, which is not easy being Central America and the sweltering heat. In front of 37,000 fans, they won 1-0 on a goal by George Pecos. Canada would have a slow 0-0 tie in Costa Rica. And then Honduras beat Costa Rica 3-1 on home turf. Now came the hard part. Canada needed to win. Canada with 4 points, Honduras with 3 points. Now remember, back in 86, a win was worth 2 instead of 3. So with a win and 2 ties, Canada knew a tie would be good enough. But the game on September 14th, 1985 would be huge for many reasons. One, of course, Canada needing a tie and Honduras needing a win to go to Mexico. But the problem was where it was played. In front of 13,000 fans in St. John's, Newfoundland at King George V Park, the game happened, and CBC covered it for Sports Weekend. Excuse me. But that's not the big part. The big part is St. John's, Newfoundland. So Canada, in a bit of gamesmanship, decides to move their game, put one game on the far east coast. Because, Canada is the 2nd largest landmass in the world, still, even though the Soviet Union broke up. So, they went to St. John's, Newfoundland. The only problem was Honduran fans made a mistake. In geography, Canada has got 10 provinces and many major cities. St. John's, Newfoundland, it was where the game was held. Unfortunately, what people forget, what some people don't know, is that there's a city in New Brunswick called St. John without the apostrophe S. So unfortunately, the Honduran fans went to St. John instead of St. John's. So they were stuck in the bar watching the game on TV. However, the Canadian fans were hospitable to the few thousand Honduran fans that actually did come by. And if you look at the highlights of the game on YouTube, Canada-Honduras in 1985, you know that the field did not really look like a soccer field. There was like triangles cut and all that. It was an amateur park, but it held 13,000 fans, which was impressive. Canada scored on a goal by George Pecos to make it 1-0. Honduras would tie it, but Canada knew they needed a tie. Fortunately for Canada, a deflected shot by Vrelevic scored, and Canada wins 2-1. They are going to the World Cup, and we were just shocked. All that. This was not the only time Canada won the CONCACAF championship. when they did the Gold Cup format back in '91, they started that. Canada won the 2000 Gold Cup, but that was an amazing Cinderella run that people were shocked Canada got through. Just to give you a brief rundown, Canada was in the 2000 Gold Cup. They were in a group with Korea for some strange reason. Canada had qualified for the knockout stages through drawing of lots because Canada and Korea both had the same record, the same score against each other, and the same goals for and against. So they had to draw a ball, and Canada got lucky. Canada would then face Mexico in San Diego and take him to extra time, but Richard Hastings scored a famous goal for Canada over the number 8 team in the world, and Canada won 2-1. It was amazing to see all that. Canada would then beat Trinidad and Tobago in the semifinals of that tournament before beating Colombia, who were also guests of the tournament, winning by a score of 2-0. So Canada technically were the top team in North America. With that in mind, now let's go to the World Cup in 1986. And people forget that Mexico was not the original host of the World Cup in '86. No, it was Colombia. But since they had financial difficulties, and I think they had an earthquake, they couldn't do it. So Mexico was next in line. But Mexico almost botched it themselves, as they had the big Mexico City earthquake of 1985, which was 8+ on the Richter scale. Fortunately, though, none of the football stadiums were destroyed and they could rebuild. Mexico became the first country to host multiple World Cups. So anyway, 1986 was in 24 teams in 6 groups of 4, but the format changed. Instead of having the top 2 in each group qualify and then play what they call 4 3-team groups to decide the semifinalists, they changed the rules. The top 2 teams in each of the 6 groups and the 4 best third place teams based on points and goal differential will join in the round of 16, and it's the knockout stages. All that. However, there was another major change. Because of Germany and Austria's shenanigans in 1982, all groups that had their final games in group game matches had to play at the same time. So for context, it meant that, for example, South Korea and Italy were in Group A, and Argentina and Bulgaria as well. So Korea and Italy played at the same time as Argentina and Bulgaria so that they didn't do any shenanigans. So Group A saw Argentina and Italy qualify as the top 2 teams. Argentina, having Maradona and all that, and Italy having their Catenaccio defense. Group B saw the host Mexicans qualify first place ahead of Paraguay, Belgium, and Iraq. Mexico knew they had to do it. 2 wins and a tie. Group C saw, Group C is Canada's group, but we'll get more into details later. Group D, Brazil and Spain easily crushed the competition, that being Northern Ireland and Algeria. Group E saw Denmark and Germany be 1-2, which was shocking. Denmark. Well, Denmark went 3-0. They beat Germany, they beat Uruguay, and they beat Scotland. Of course, that group is known for the bullshit stuff that Uruguay did against Scotland in the final game of the 1986 group stages. But I'll get to that when I talk about Scotland's World Cup history. And Group F saw Morocco win the group with England, Poland, and Portugal. Great. If I was alive in 1986, if I was alive and at the same time as my sister-in-law of Polish ancestry and, knowing many Portuguese people, it would have been crazy, all the trash talk and all that stuff. But Morocco won the group. England took second on a dull win-loss tie. Okay. Just to let you know that Belgium, Poland, Bulgaria, and Uruguay were the top third-place teams. Uruguay, I kind of felt angry about because, they butchered Scotland just to get this far. But they could have lost a goal differential. Because Hungary was there, but Hungary gave up 9 goals in their 3 games. 9 to Canada. Northern Ireland was also knocked out, but yeah. That's what happened. But it's time for Group C. So Group C was Canada being one of the lowest ranked teams, they were doomed to face tough opposition. So Canada would have to deal with the Soviets, French, and Hungarians. Now the Soviets were decent, but they didn't make a lot of World Cup runs. The French, they were the European champs in 1984. And Hungary used to be a fantastic team once upon a time in the 50s, before the Hungarian Revolution, thanks to the Soviets. So Canada was first up on the list. They would play on June 1st, 1986, which was my sister's 4th birthday, if you must know, at 4 Central Time, when meeting it was 5 o'clock Eastern Time when people in Canada were watching the game. And for some unknown reason, Canada held France in check. The French were the European champs and were expected to crush Canada by a lot. I forget who said it in a documentary about Canada 86. I would say Paul Stalteri, but I'm probably wrong. I think it was, I don't know who it was, Bruce Wilson or Bob Lenarduzzi, I think it was, said that, Mexican fans would always flash fingers about what the scores would be. And then they would put both hands up for France and nothing for Canada. In fact, Canada was heavily expected not to score a goal. So Canada started off. They had Paul Dolan in net, the defense of Bob Lenarduzzi, Bruce Wilson, Ian Bridge, and Randy Samuel, with Randy Reagan, Mike Sweeney, David Norman, and Paul James in midfield. Carl Valentine and Igor Vreliblik would be your offense for forwards. However, Canada would make 2 changes. Jamie Lowry came in for Sweeney, and Branko Sagada came in for Paul James. Canada was badly outshot in that game. But somehow, in some way, the French stumbled over themselves. They had like 6 or 7 scoring attempts, and they fumbled it before Jean-Pierre Papin scored to make it 1-0. So Canada felt good about themselves. I mean, I would too. I mean, you hold the European champs to a 1-0 win. The Soviets crushed Hungary 6-0, so Hungary was not ready for prime time. After that, the French held the Soviets to a 1-1 tie, but Canada would believe it. So June 6, 1986, at 1 Eastern Time, they would face the Hungarians in Araputo. I forgot to mention that the first game was in Lyon at the Estadio du Camp. So they go from Lyon, Mexico to Araputo. And Canada, after seeing Hungary got the crap beaten out of them 6-0, thought, hey, we might score a goal. Canada had the chances, but they stumbled. Canada for that second game had Tito Lettieri in net instead of Paul Dolan. The defense was Lenarduzzi, Wilson, Bridge, and Samuel. Midfield was Reagan. Jerry Gray got into the starting lineup with David Norman and Paul James. The forwards were Valentine and Vreliblik. Unfortunately for Canada, despite a couple of chances, they lost 2-0 on goals by Esterhazy and Dattari. Mike Sweeney came into the game for Bruce Wilson. Unfortunately for Sweeney, he got yellow carded in the 52nd minute. And worse, he got red carded. He got another yellow card, which means in soccer, 2 yellow cards, red card, you're out. And you're out for the next match. So Sweeney was there. Sagada came in for James. So Canada was not too happy with themselves. I would be too. France would beat Hungary 3-0, and then Canada would face the Soviets at 1 Eastern Time, June 9th, 1986, in Araputo. At least they didn't have to move. But the Soviets, who crushed Hungary, crushed Canada 2-0 and goals by Byokin and Savarov. Canada had Lettieri back in net with Lenarduzzi, Wilson, Bridge, and Samuel defense. Midfield, Reagan, Gray, Norman James. Forwards were Valentine, and then Dale Mitchell was the starting forward, not Vreliblik. Sagada did get in the game for Paul James, and George Pecos surprised a lot of people. Like, he finally got into the World Cup. He got in for Gray, but Canada had nothing. So Canada was toast. Not only did they not win a game, they didn't even tie. 3 terrible losses. And the fans were right. Canada could not score a goal in that World Cup. Pissing me off if I had the knowledge. But, of course, I was 14 months old, so I wasn't a child genius. But what ticks me off more in the grand scheme of things is how Uruguay, giving up all those goals to Denmark in that one game, actually managed to get to the second phase, like the knockouts phases, and they gave up more goals than Canada did. Canada gave up 5 goals in 3 games. Canada only gave up 5 goals, which was amazing. It was like hard to believe. Yeah, Canada gave up 5 goals. They gave up more goals than Hungary, yet Hungary beat them. Less goals, sorry. Belgium gave up 5 goals in their knockout game, in their um, group games with Mexico, Paraguay, and Iraq. Uruguay gave up 7 goals, including that 6-goal shellacking by Denmark, and they got in. But yeah, so Uruguay got in more goals. So Canada was out. I mean, okay, Canada should have done better in the World Cup, but you know there were minnows. There were gigantic minnows. So Canada were minnows, and they knew it too because Canada didn't really have a lot of soccer history. They were close in '78 and '82 to qualify, but no, they missed out. So Canada was out. Then came the round of 16. Mexico beat Bulgaria 2-0. I mean, it is Mexico. And Negrete, that spider kick, the scorpion kick, that heard around the world. The volley heard around the world, being Bulgaria. Belgium would take out one of Canada's Group C rivals, the Soviets, 4-3 in extra time. It was a tight game. Belarus actually had a hat trick for the Soviets, but they still lost to Belgium. Brazil crushed Poland 4-0. Argentina beat Uruguay 1-0. Only 1-0. Argentina should have beaten the tar out of Uruguay. France would beat the World Cup holders, Italy, 2-0 on goals by Platini and Surpria. So France kind of got back in the group. Germany only beat Morocco 1-0. Well, I know it's West Germany, but I say Germany because you know that England would beat Paraguay 3-0. They finally got up. They finally got themselves up. Lineker with a pair of goals. Spain crushed Denmark 5-1 thanks to Putagora and Goikachira. Well, Putagora actually scored 4 goals that game for Spain. Brazil and France went, and then it was the quarterfinals. Brazil and France had to go to extra time. Croatia for Brazil and Platini for France scored regulation. But on penalties, Brazil missed twice, France only missed once, and Fernandes scored the key goal that gave France a trip to the semifinals. Germany and Mexico would be held to extra time too. Mexico did well enough not to let Germany score on them. But unfortunately, even though Negrete scored for Mexico, they missed their last 2 kicks, and Germany was el perfecto. Alves, Brema, Mateus, and Lubarski. And then next came that famous hand of God goal by Argentina to beat England 2-1. Maradona had to have punched it because, I mean, Peter Shilton 6'1", and Maradona was 5'6" or something like that. So Maradona punched the ball and got lucky that the referees didn't call it back. But let's not forget that Maradona's second goal was a piece of footballing genius. I know I covered it in my Sports Catastrophe birthday boy about Maradona, but man, weaving through the English defense, who could have hacked him and all that, give up a free kick and all that. But Maradona went through the whole English defense and scored. England did score on a goal by Lineker, and he almost tied it, but he didn't get the head on the ball. The fourth quarterfinal also went to extra time, so went to penalties. So 3 out of the 4 quarterfinals went to penalties. Spain got a goal by Senor in regulation, and Belgium had Ceulemans. Spain missed once. Belgium hit all 5. Clayson, Skiefel, Bruce, Benford, and Van de Elst. So Belgium got to the semifinals. So June 25th was the semifinals, and Germany crushed France 2-0. Brema and Foller put the goals in, and the European champs were out. The other semi saw Argentina with Maradona putting up a pair of goals against the Belgians. So we would see the final. But first, on June 28th, was the third place match between Belgium and France. And they both played each other tough, even though only 21,000 fans came to Puebla. Belgium played hard. Ceulemans and Clayson scored for Belgium, where Ferrari and Papin for France scored. So there's 2-2 headed to extra time. 30 minutes. Most goals scored wins. No golden goal bullshit that people would have to see in the 90s. But Giardini and Amro scored, and Belgium felt terrible about themselves. But hey, they got to the third place playoff. I don't think Belgium was predicted to be top 4. And Ansel Skiefel was actually named the best young player in the tournament. The golden ball went to Diego Maradona. for the MVP, and the Golden Boot for most goals was Lineker. Germany would go on to lose to Argentina 3-2 in the final as Brown, who was Argentine born, even though he was of English heritage, Valdano and Biro Chaka scored. Germany did have goals by Rummenigge and Fuller, but Argentina won the World Cup 3-2. So, yeah, it was hard pressed, but it's Canada. I know I talk about Canada, but yeah, the 86 World Cup transcended a lot of people and all that. The goal scoring, the power, the hot Azteca sun. Hey, I like that tournament. Even though Canada didn't score one freaking goal in that tournament. Kind of ticks me off. But hopefully we'll get one in 2022. I'm sure of it. I'm very sure. And heck, maybe we might make the knockout stages. But, Belgium and Croatia are no weaklings. And Morocco, we can beat Morocco. We will beat Morocco. Let's hope we beat Morocco. Anyway, thanks for watching this Cutters World Cup Stories. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.